Hey, what's up, everybody? It's a Monday night, of course, and we are back to review the Bad Batch episode number 12. And it's all happening right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, yeah, lots going on. Like I said before, when we were off the air, I was out test driving a Wrangler. It was a 2017, though. It wasn't the 2021 because they didn't have one on the lot. But, yeah, it was pretty cool. But you know what? That's why we were a little late getting on, unfortunately. But we're here, man. We're here to talk about episode number 12, which is called Rescue on Ryloth. So what were your overall thoughts on this thing?
Overall, exactly what I expected. It was really good. Good action, great story, good comedic moments, and nice little tension at the end. So it was all good goes for me.
Yeah, I have to agree, actually, that I think that this was probably, in my opinion, one of the more well-balanced episodes of the show. It had a little bit of everything that makes the Bad Batch cool, including this time the Bad Batch, because they were noticeably absent from the last episode, which we said in last week's review, that was actually done by design and that was necessary. And it's good that it's not going to devolve into this whole, basically the latest episode or adventure of the week for the Bad Batch, where they go on a bunch of meaningless missions or whatever that maybe play into the... Exactly. But what I thought was really cool about this is the fact that you did get the Bad Batch featured, but again, they were placed properly in the story. And I think that that's something that is really a temptation for some storytellers to do, is if you have a main character, especially when the show is named after them, they want to jam them in almost like every scene. Whereas in this one, they basically used them exactly as they needed to be in the story. So I thought that this was cool. Of course, we're getting a little bit more of Hera, who Hera Syndulla, as we know, and Cham Syndulla, for that matter, are pretty prominent characters in Rebels. And it's setting up a little bit of that world. So I really enjoyed, once again, we're getting a little bit more world building. We're getting a little bit more of actually what makes, I think, this a really great series. Of course, I want to welcome Ronaldo. So Ronaldo's there. So that's good. So what do you say we dive deep into this thing?
Hey, let's get to it.
All right, let's do it. Take us through.
All right. So episode 12, as you said, is titled Rescue on Ryloth. So
yeah, try saying that 3 times fast, right?
I know either Candyman is going to pop out.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it was really cool. It starts off with the Imperial officer walking in, kind of chastising, Cham Syndulla, and kind of basically pleading with him like, hey, just tell her where your daughter is. It's rough out there. We're trying to make it easy. And kind of doing that whole typical, villainous thing of just, I'll make sure she's safe. And, where his wife kind of delivers a very poignant line when she says, I've seen what you're like with your allies. I'd much rather be your enemy.
That I thought
that was a cool line.
Was the coolest line. I mean, it was one of those.
That was great.
First of all, it was perfect Star Wars. It was a perfect Star Wars line, but I mean that one took me by surprise because when you remember, of course, from the last one, they basically just shot the guy. She was like, you know what? Yeah, see how you treat your allies. I'm good being your enemy. Yeah, that line was good. I got to give it to him on that one.
So. Then we kind of shift over and we see, Hera, she's basically dealing with Chopper, and she's kind of showing her wits and craftiness, and she pretty much is trying to, run away from the clones the clone troopers who are after her, which is led by Crosshair. Now, prior to that, when they were having this conversation with Cham Syndulla and his wife, we see the Commander Hauser, who's kind of been a friend to the Syndulla family. and kind of a trusted friend at that. And so you can tell even then he's conflicted, just about what's going on as far as his new orders from the Empire, but then his loyalty to Ryloth and fighting next to the Syndulla family. So you can really see his conflict that he's having right there, and even the hurt amongst the Syndulla family.
Yeah.
So anywho, yeah.
No, that's one of the things that I think was really cool that I thought they did a phenomenal job on this episode, where basically it stands to reason, even though it's a very obvious thing. I don't think any of us really thought about it, but the whole situation with the galaxy right now with the Empire, it's going to turn some people who were once allies into adversaries. It's forcing people on opposite sides, and people are going to have to make a choice. Like, okay, do I just say, you know what, we're on opposite sides now, and or do you actually say, look, there's something wrong with this? And I think that this episode is addressing that. And of course, as we go on, you'll see that it addresses that more and more as time goes on. But I can't understate, or I should say, I can't overstate enough how well this show deals with, surprisingly well, by the way, the whole shift from the Republic to the Empire and what it does to its citizenry and everything else. I mean, it really does a great job in really putting you in that world and in that situation and showing you, look, this isn't just some seamless transition. I mean, this is something that really was tough, because we only really saw all this from the top. You got your Palpatine, Vader, the top rebel guys or whatever. So it seemed more seamless. But when you get down a little bit lower on that pyramid and you see what the actual citizens of the galaxy have to deal with, it's a whole different game. And they have to get used to a bunch of different things. And, people that were once kind of more like their friends or people they can look up to are now a little bit more sinister. And yeah, Captain Hauser, who basically was a trusted friend, he's torn, because on one hand, he has to follow the orders of this new regime. It's not like it wasn't like the Separatists overthrew the Republic and now there's a bunch of new rules. It's basically like the Republic became the Empire, same government, but now they got all these new directives and rules and procedures and everything, and a lot of these guys like Hauser are caught in the middle of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really one of those things where, like, you really see the difference, because, even the clones could see the fairness of things. Like, okay, in their missions and the things that we're doing, especially being led by the Jedi, they got a chance to really see, like, okay, being fair, being smart, all that type of stuff. Now they're being asked to do things that are very uncouth. And that's where they're starting to see, like, okay, we didn't do stuff like this before. Why are we doing this stuff now? Like, this is kind of what we fought against, and yet we're doing it now. And I think that's really the big thing.
Well, I think also what you got to look at is there are some of the troopers that just are blindly like, all right, whatever, this is what we're supposed to do, let's do it. They don't seem to have a problem with it. And it really makes me wonder going forward how they're going to explain this, because I'm wondering in the clones how do I want to put this? Like, I don't really want to say how effective, but how influential, I'll put it like that. How influential is that inhibitor chip? Because we were led to believe at first that it was just, okay, they got to kill the Jedi, they got to do whatever, but it seems like it has some lasting effects, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the whole thing about, in their genetic makeup and everything like that. With that inhibitor chip, it makes them follow orders. But the problem is, and this is what we're seeing, is that, there's some degradation in that, and I think as the clones, depending on, the further they get away from, the original specimen, you're starting to see a lot of loss, as we used to say in our area, signal loss. It's kind of becoming a little scattered. And so I think now, you're starting to see stuff where people are starting to kind of like, hey, this isn't quite right. This isn't cool.
Yeah, well, let me, before you go on, because Ronaldo has an interesting question about this. He said, this episode's make me doubt, is the effect of the chips in the clones temporary? And I wanted to put that up there because this is exactly what we're talking about right now. He goes on to say, it appears that the chip lowered its control over the clones after Order 66. Now, my theory, which is what I was about to say before Ronaldo chimed in, was, and it goes to your point almost with the degradation, it seems like it's stronger in some clones than it is others. And I think that there's almost like the personality of the clone will depend on how strong of an influence the chip has.
That, and I think it's also like, it's probably like I said before, the genetic material, because,
well, that too, yeah.
You know, so I think that both kind of plays a part into it. And I think that's why the Empire is starting to see some things like, okay, these clones aren't responding the way that they once were. Before, they used to be blindly like, yes, sir, no questions asked about it. You know, but even, you know, there's even times where we saw in the original Clone Wars, right? When before the whole Order 66, there'll be times where Luke or Obi-Wan would like give a directive, and Rex and those guys really didn't understand it. And they were like, General, are you sure? I mean, this doesn't seem, and they're like, well, do it, you know, Rex. And he's like, all right. And it worked out. And then they eventually apologized for it. Like,
but that was before the chip was activated, though.
But that's what I'm saying, though. Like, they still questioned this, my point.
Well, yeah.
They still kind of question those directives. It wasn't just complete blind.
Right, you're saying that was kind of part of their personality. And honestly, I think that is part of their design in a way, because they were designed to be strategic, to be critical thinkers. That's what actually made the clones better than a droid army.
Droid, exactly.
You know,
so I think that's backfiring on, you know, the Empire at this point, because now they're starting to see like, okay, some of their things, that the fact that they're able to be strategic and, like you said, you know, being able to kind of assess different things. Well, now when you're asking them to do stuff that's kind of clearly, you know, in violation of stuff, now you have to deal with the aftermath of that.
Right. Ronaldo goes on to say maybe the chip doesn't fully work on strong-minded clones like Rex or Hauser, and that could be too.
That's a possibility.
You know, there could be.
We might hear more about this. Like, you know, this might be kind of a underlying thread, you know, as it's kind of being unraveled. As the because, like you said, Eric, you know, we kind of have to see how, because, you know, your big question has always been since day one, how are we going to get from clone troopers to stormtroopers? Like, what happened? And I think this is kind of the whole, the kind of that thread that you pull. And as we keep going along each episode or each season of the show, you know, we're going to constantly keep pulling on that thread until it unravels completely and we finally figure out how that happened.
Well, and it has to be something fairly drastic, because if you really stop and think about the amount of time in between, because don't forget, we're seeing stormtroopers as early as Solo, a Star Wars story. And that doesn't take place too terribly long after episode 3. So, and then of course by the time Rebels hits, they're fully stormtroopers. So the whole switch from clone troopers to stormtroopers comes pretty quickly, probably within a 10-year span. So they have to explain that. Ronaldo says that the chip totally worked with Commander Cody in episode 3, and it did. I mean, that was, I think, one of the examples of where they had to illustrate it. And I think, in a way, this is where they kind of paint themselves into a corner a little bit, canon-wise, because now they're trying to show a little bit more of the subtleties, and Lucas was always more about the macro than he was the details. And so the problem is, they're trying to explore all this stuff about the chip's effect on the clones and how it's doing everything, and they're trying to explain all these little details about it. But now you have to wonder, because Cody wasn't really a weak-minded guy or anything like that. But of course, Lucas actually used him because he was one of the ones that was really a friend to he was Obi-Wan's friend almost. And they wanted to show that ultimate betrayal, because that's an example of a relationship that we saw. So it's going to be interesting to see, you know, where they move from here or whatever. But yeah, man, let's go on with this episode.
Yeah. So we kind of delve in and we see, you know, Hera's kind of making some plans with Chopper to kind of, you know, stage a rendezvous mission. She's realized, like, okay, you know, I can't go back home. Crosshair and his, you know, minions are pretty much crawling all over the place. So she decides to go to her dad's, abandoned outpost base to kind of hide out, where she sends a message on the emergency comm link to the Bad Batch. And so, of course, the Bad Batch, they're flying in space. And this is another cool line, too. Omega, we see Omega, she's tinkering with some droid or whatever, and, it's not working. And so she tells Hunter, yeah, this thing is, acting up. And Hunter basically tells us, like, well, yeah, it's defective. And as he walks off, Omega says, it's okay, we're defective too. Yeah, I thought that was like a hilarious, kind of cute line,
That was. There were actually 3 lines in this episode that made me just go, yeah, man, that's really cool. Those were 2 of them.
That's 2. We got one more. I know which one you're talking about. So, as we continue to go on, they kind of like looking at Omega like, well, you get rid of the emergency channel, and it's like, well, yeah, in case of emergency, this sounds like an emergency. And then now they're kind of having this whole debate and discussion of whether they should get involved or not, because Hunter feels that, we can't get involved every time, someone is in trouble. But then Omega's kind of like, well, isn't that kind of what we do? I mean, we're soldiers. It's like, what's the point?
Which again, this is some stuff that they really haven't dealt with, in my opinion, to this degree in any of the shows or even the movies, really. Well, in the movies, they wouldn't really have time. But even though they did explore some themes, it never went this deep in either the Clone Wars or Rebels. And this is the kind of thing I've always wanted out of these shows. And I think it's really cool. And again, I get it that this particular era in Star Wars is a little bit more ripe for that kind of thing. And in the Clone Wars, it would almost be hard to do because it would start to sound preachy a little bit, probably, if they did, because, war's bad and all this stuff, and they're in the middle of a war. But now, this is kind of like the aftermath. And that's why, as I've said a million times, even during this show today, it's really, to me, one of the most interesting time periods to delve into. And what's funny is it's one of the time periods that they haven't really. Yeah, they've gone in between episodes 3 and 4, but it's usually, 10, 15, usually a little bit closer to 4.
See, honestly, to be honest with you, Eric, like, I feel like I would have preferred this story, or whether you told it through the Bad Batch or whatever, I would have preferred this over the Solo movie.
Yeah.
I think I would have rather have seen like this fleshed out more than actually getting that Solo movie.
Well, I think that's because we don't. One of the things that everybody has said, you and I even share this opinion. We like the Solo movie. I mean, it's a really good, fun movie, but it's a movie we didn't need. And I think, we need this.
Animated. Yeah, we needed this. And I feel like, if they would have made this a movie, or not even just a movie, because actually I kind of like it more as a series, honestly. But because I feel like you can really, like you said, truly expound upon it. But I think that they could have done the Solo movie almost as a direct to Disney Plus thing, if they wanted to do like a limited series run or something like that, like a 1-season thing.
Well, you know what?
Or
they could have,
or make it animated.
Well, or there's a third option, and this is something they actually have yet to do that I'd love to see, and that's make a standalone Disney Plus movie.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, yeah, just straight to Disney Plus.
Because see, right now we're getting these limited series, like your Obi-Wan, Book of Boba Fett, that sort of thing. The Mandalorian, of course, not that that's limited, but these are actually series type shows, and you're also getting a series type show in the animated, but they've never actually done a show where, or not even a show, but like a movie, but made for Disney Plus, very similar to how they make movies for Netflix or Prime or anything like that. And I would love to see that. And another thing that they could do, just because they have one standalone film doesn't mean they would have to stop there. They don't necessarily have to make it a trilogy, but they could go back to that. And here's the other thing that I wanted to say about Solo. Because Solo did introduce us to some really cool canonical things that definitely deserve their own film. And I'm talking about the whole Crimson Dawn thing.
Yeah.
With Kira Maul.
And Darth Maul. Yep.
You know, because they're doing that in the comic. I think the War of the Bounty Hunters or something. They're actually starting to bring those characters back into the forefront. One of the things that made me super excited is how they mentioned the Black Sun, which, as we know, I always thought that Crimson Dawn was basically Disney era Star Wars giving
version
a
of
little,
the Black Sun.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of tipping their hat a little bit to Black Sun and creating a new version of it. So imagine my surprise when Black Sun is starting to now appear in the whole canon. It's like, oh, now they're going to have two of these things. So, yeah, I couldn't be more excited about this stuff.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that was a great line. Just to bring it back full circle, right?
Right.
I'm telling you, man, I miss my skyline behind me.
Oh,
that was really cool last week. That I had this old Chicago skyline happening. You know, I mean,
yeah, it was pretty dope.
Of course, my face is more lit this time, but you know, I digress.
Hey. So they kind of our heroes kind of figure out like, all right, we're gonna go and see what this is all about. So they kind of pop up and check on Hera, and they kind of find out everything. And that's when Hera pretty much says like, yeah, my parents are in captivity. I need your help. And that's when Tech kind of finds out like, oh, okay, Cham is the freedom fighter, and then now they're kind of starting to see like, all right, this is another Empire type situation. One of the cool things I did like is that they figured out that Ryloth is not a military base. It's not a military institution, but yet you're building this whole thing. So that already kind of piqued some things like, okay, why are they doing this? This doesn't seem right once again, so that's another reason why they wanted to go investigate. And so upon, meeting with Hera, Hunter's kind of like, yeah, this is a bit much for us, and I know what he's really thinking. He's really thinking like, I don't want to subject Omega to any of this crap.
Well, I think there's that, but I also think that I do take some of this at face value because remember, they're wanted too. I mean, granted, True. Omega's more wanted than they are, but let's not discount their wantedness, if you will.
Exactly.
I mean, they're probably sitting there thinking to themselves, like, look, man, the last thing we want to do is draw a ton of attention to ourselves. And what I really like about this...
We've already been kind of doing that anyway.
Yeah, well, here's the thing that really fascinates me about this whole thing, is that when you first meet the Bad Batch, let's count Season 7 of the Clone Wars, because that's when we meet this iteration of the Bad Batch. These guys are like the thrill seekers. They're basically like the Anakin of clones, right? They're going in. They're like the first ones. What's really cool about what we're seeing in this series is now they're showing a lot of restraint. Like, you know what? We don't really want to jump in on every little thing and be the essentially Star Wars version of Superman or something where we come in and save the day for everybody. It's like, look, they look at everything that was in that particular installation and they're going, you know what? Yeah, there's a lot of those guys. I don't think that we're going to be able to do this.
Well, that's the thing is they don't have to see back then in season 7 of the Clone Wars, they were still part of the Republic.
True.
So they had the backup. They weren't wanted by their own government.
Yeah.
It's like Jason Bourne. It's like, okay, that's kind of like what these guys are. They're kind of like 5 Jason Bournes running around, and I think that's been the interesting thing about all of this is that like they're wanted by their former government, and then Omega is kind of wrapped up in that too, but they can handle themselves, but they know that, she's just a kid. So they're like, they're a little bit more protective over her.
Oh, and I think that's a big part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But I did love the fact that, Omega kind of, chastised Hunter for kind of the harshness and the things that he said to Hera. And then she kind of said, well, I would have done it for you.
Yeah, that was
kind of makes Hunter goes like, all right. So then she goes and talks to Hera and she's like, well, why do you listen to them? She's like, well, they're my brothers. And then she's kind of confused, like, brothers, like, huh?
It's funny. So the way she delivered that line was almost how
almost
Luke,
like Leia.
yeah,
Yeah,
like my sister. I mean,
my
it really
sister has
reminded
it.
me of that. So
It
kind
truly,
of
yeah,
just
it
the
truly did.
delivery of it.
Yep. And then, so after that, uh, you know, Hera and Omega kind of come up with their own little plan, what have you. And she's like, "Well, look, let's just find a way to make this work, and then just present it to them." And you know, and so it works, and it was cool to kind of see them like, "All right, I guess we'll take the lead. We'll let you take the lead on this. This is your hometown, so you let us know kind of like where everything is." And they kind of formulate their plan. Well, in the midst of them scouting everything out, Omega notices, Crosshair's here. And then they're like, okay, yeah, this just got a little bit more complicated. And then now they're getting spied on by a probe droid at that. So Hunter
Stupid
goes
probe
off, and
droids, man.
I know, man, they always like ruin the fun
Always.
ever since Empire, man. So Hunter takes out the probe droid, but then they kind of know, like, all right, well, Crosshair knows we're here, so the element of surprise is gone. So now we kind of have to like move quickly and do this. And so in the process of all this, one of the other military, one of the other clone troopers kind of informs Crosshair, like, yep, Prodre picked up this thing, these little band of people sitting out here. Crosshair automatically knows who it is. He's like, all right. He goes to his administrator's like, look, Clone Force 99 is here. He's like, well, yeah, you just worry about finding Hera, I have a whole battalion to deal with them. He's just like, that's not enough, dude.
Yeah, it won't be enough. And that's one of the things that I think is cool, because usually when you do the typical good guy switches and he's the bad guy now, he's always underestimating his former comrades or, guys or whatever. I love the fact that in this, he's not. He's actually, we got this whole, but no, yeah, that's not going to be enough. You're going to need more. You're going to need more people. Like, these guys are really good. Like, he's still giving that.
You give them their just due.
Yeah. And that's something you really don't see a lot.
Well, it's kind of like how you and I used to talk about, Jack Bauer. Like, this guy has an insight, but no one wants to listen to him. Like, Crosshair has said this a couple of times to people. Like, that's not enough. You're going to need more,
Right, and then they don't listen, like, and then, yeah, right.
He's just kind of like, see, told you, So, so at this point, once again, Hauser is there. He's hearing all this, seeing all this. And so he's trying to like kind of let the Syndulla family know, like, hey, they're really after Hera. I'm trying to help you. But then the Syndulla's like, oh, like, you helped us with Ryloth. It's kind of like that whole Han Solo thing. Like, he's like, oh, yeah, my friend, that whole vibe. It had a lot of Empire Strikes Back, kind of moments.
It really did. I did pick that up too. I picked up a lot of Empire Strikes Back kind of vibes going. But if you think about it, there's a lot of that, because that particular, like the third act of Empire Strikes Back had a lot of betrayal type of things. Lando came across a friend. Yeah, I'm going to help you. And then, oh, by the way, here's the Empire, and I'm turning you over to these guys. And
right, so there was a little bit here.
Right. And it did remind me of that, because once again, the situation in the galaxy is pretty much making people face those kinds of choices. Which side are you going to take? Are you going to go for the ideology that we used to share, but now we're on opposite sides, and how do we handle that? And that's a very real thing. And once again, I can't say it enough that I think it's just a tremendous asset to us as fans that we finally have people that are willing to tackle these things. And it's so surprising that it's being done in an animated series. You wouldn't think that that would be the case, but it is. And I think it just deepens the emotions and the connection that we have to the story, and it really makes for really good stories moving forward. I'm really looking forward to how all this stuff is going to end now, because we only have,
definitely.
After this, we only have like 4 more, 13, 14. Yeah, we have 4 more episodes. So it's getting there.
Definitely. So at this point, now Crosshair's kind of like, all right, I'm not going to be outdone by this regular clone over here. So he's going to go try to find Hera, and he's once again following orders. And so now at this point, our heroes kind of, figure out, I know what we'll do. We'll actually just attack the refinery, make them think that we're attacking this one place. It's kind of like, I'm going to do something over here so you don't see what this hand is doing. And so that's the real game of it all. And so they cause a big distraction and commotion with the refinery. And, the plan is to have Hunter and Echo actually go and rescue Cham Syndulla and the family. Now, one of the things I thought was kind of hilarious in their whole briefing was, Tech once again dropping the line like, you're going to send these two by themselves, talking about Hera and Omega. So I thought that was kind of funny. But, it was just kind of like, well, all right, she's a part of the team, so she does what she does.
I mean, the humor in this is really fantastic. And we're getting close to the third line that I loved, which is just, to me, one of the funniest lines ever that I always wanted to hear people say. But
exactly. So they kind of, create this whole diversion where Chopper is supposed to actually infiltrate, the stronghold, get in there. I always love Chopper because he's kind of like the most ruthless little droid ever. He just rolls behind,
and he just rolls up behind
people, electrocuting people.
I know. And here's the thing that I thought was really, really cool, and that is that first of all, I think his animation is way better than it was in Rebels, but that's obviously because technology moves forward and they can do more stuff. But I'm really happy to see that they haven't changed Chopper that much, that he's still the same character that he always was.
Yeah, and it's funny to see how his personality comes out, even though he can't talk. Just the way he acts and does stuff, you just know, like, he's that spunky, fiery, almost like fearless kind of droid. Unlike 3PO, who's completely terrified of everything. So Chopper goes in. He's trying to deactivate the cannons. He can't do it. He actually gets busted. So now Omega and Hera have to kind of make an audible at the line of scrimmage, if I can use the football analogy. And
wonder how many people just were instantly lost by that line. You're gonna do what?
Right. So basically they kind of changed the plan, and they said, all right, well, we got to destroy these things somehow. Oh, look, a shuttle. Well, you want to be a pilot. Let's go pilot this thing and knock these cannons out. So that's what they go and do. And of course, Hera's never really taken off. That's the cool thing, and that was a whole cool thing about the whole setup from the last episode, is that you see that she's a budding pilot. Like, she wants to be a pilot. She dreams of flying, and they even made the point to say it in the episode. All right, well, you never let me take off or land. You just kind of let me fly as it. He's like, well, those things are kind of difficult and kind of require some skill. So we're just trying to, get your feet wet here a little bit. So it was hilarious because now she actually has to take off from somewhere, and that didn't go well. So she's like swinging the ship around all over the place, which is kind of helping with their whole distraction. But she finally gets it under control, takes out the cannons. Everything's good. And so then now Chopper is able to kind of like get free, and he blasts up with his little pack at the bottom, and he hops on the ship.
Who is she in the ship with?
She's in the ship with Omega.
Was it just Omega?
Yeah, it was Omega. It was Omega and Hera, and then Chopper ended up, popping on.
Yep.
So at this point now, of course, the whole base is kind of like, all right, alerted to everything that's going on. Crosshair is kind of like, hey, not Crosshair, but Hauser comes in. He's like, hey, this refinery's under attack. He's kind of like, look, you just stay here, guard the base. I'm gonna go deal with this whole refinery business. And in the process of all this, now we have all these inbound, ships that are coming. Hunter and Echo actually succeed in their mission. They actually rescue the Ryloth family, and they're moving them to safety. Of course, they're kind of like, well, what do you get? Even the brother was like, wait, what are you guys doing here? And Cham was like, well, you know him? He's like, well, yeah, they're mercenaries, but how did you get in there? It's like, well, Hera sent us. And they're like, Hera? So of course, Cham was like, well, is she all right? Is she safe? That's when we flash back to them flying around. And, now Hera's finally gotten kind of getting the hang of, flying the ship, and they're doing their thing. And Hera's kind of like, yeah, man, this is actually kind of cool. Like, they can't, how does she word it? They can't keep up with me or something like that. And Tech utters the hilarious lines. Who's like, well,
this
yes,
is the one. This is the line. Number 3.
Yeah. Tech utters a line. He's like, well, yes, your unpredictable and dangerous, reckless flying is as much as confusing to them as it is to me. So
yeah,
I thought that was like this one hilarious.
That was the coolest line. Especially the way that he delivered it.
Calmly. Yeah, it was so
calmly. So calmly. All right, before we got a healthy amount of chats here, and Dwight's joined us too. So,
it was so Dwight.
Let me get to some of these. So Ronaldo first starts out by asking, "What do you think is more likely? That Hera will appear again in the Bad Batch, or that Omega appears in some of the new series where Hera is an important character?" That's a good question.
I think you'll probably see Hera more in the Bad Batch.
I would agree with that, but I would not rule out her appearing in other, let's call it Hera-centric stuff. But the only thing that's going to be interesting, though, is that I'm not necessarily sure what they're going to do, because at this point, it would actually make sense for them to move Hera into live action into something like the Ahsoka series. But I'm not necessarily sure they're ready to move Omega into live action yet.
And the thing is, we don't know her fate. Like, we don't know if her or the Bad Batch are actually going to survive.
Well, that's a good point, too.
We don't know if they're going to make it out of this thing at all.
I mean, yeah, there is
We know Hera does because Rebels.
Well, sure.
But,
right. Ronaldo says, because from what Hera said, the two of them will see each other again. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see. That's going to be an interesting one. Ronaldo goes on to say, actually, I said the same as Tech. It seems strange to me that he sent the two of them alone. And yeah, that was one of the things that we thought was really interesting too. And again, it's kind of like what Daryl brought up, is the fact that it's refreshing that they're not keeping these younger, more kid-like characters in that little box that they usually do, because you usually get one of two things happening. And they're really extreme reactions to the same thing. So either they get overprotective and then the kid is almost like comic relief, but they don't really let him do much. Or they try to overcorrect, and now the kid's doing stuff that they shouldn't even be able to do. The kid will end up saving the day, or, and all this other stuff. And it's like, oh, come on now. I mean, I can understand somebody being kind of naturally good. I mean, at least with Anakin, you had the Force explanation. He was the chosen one after all, so I guess we can give him a pass. Okay, so this is where we get to a couple of Chopper-related things. Ronaldo said, Chopper is the greatest serial killer in the Star Wars universe. I have to disagree, because you have to remember, if we go expanded universe, you have the Knights of the Old Republic droid, was it HK-47 or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
But then also, don't forget in Aftermath, you had, was it Mr. Bones?
Oh, yes, like Mr. Bones.
He was like a reprogrammed droid or something that was like just insane.
Was that a protocol droid?
No, I think he was like one of those Roger, like typical droids.
Gotcha.
Dwight says Chopper does do it with a hilariously sense of joy, and
he does.
That's it, and that's what I always thought, that Chopper was kind of, he was almost like the, I guess, in-universe, or Aftermath is too, but it's sort of like they took the HK-47 concept from, the whole Knights of the Old Republic thing, and kind of blended it into this one droid. And I do like the fact that other than some noises, you can even tell the noises that he makes
like his tone, that he could tell
Yeah,
when he's
you could
like
tell just
angry
like
or
his anger, or whether he's being sarcastic, or they do a really
yeah.
good job of that, I thought. Okay, so
I like the way he uses his tools as like hands. So like when the
yes,
stormtroopers come up, he's like he lifts both
yes.
his tools up. He's like, all right, I give up.
And then Ronaldo was like, I need a shirt with that line. It was hilarious. So
Man, yeah.
it was one of the
That's
one of the
actually
great.
something Dwight will say.
All right, so
But
go ahead and bring us on home with this one.
all right, so bringing us home,
I mean, with the plot.
now, yeah, I got you. So not everything is kind of like, wrapping up. They secured the family, and now, um, they're kind of, bringing everybody kind of back together. The team is kind of coming back together. Um, and at this point, the Syndulla family is offering them the Bad Batch some money. Like, well, look, we're paying you for, what you did for us. And they're like, no, you guys need to keep it for what you guys have to do later on. And now, once again, Hunter is kind of like saying like, yeah, this is starting to happen all over the galaxy. And that's the cool thing. Like they're starting to notice like how things are happening all over the place. And
Yeah,
so
that honeymoon period is starting to get over, and people are like, you know what? This is not good.
Exactly. But what I do like is the fact that, we're starting to see the budding of the rebellion, because we've already seen Champ Syndulla. We already saw Saw Gerrera earlier, so I think, and then we also had Rex, who's kind of alluded to the fact that like, I have some other business I need to take care of. So what I'm seeing, and I think how the Bad Batch is I'm kind of predicting this, is that we're going to eventually get to the point where we see the formation of the actual rebellion at this point, at the end of this.
I wonder how many seasons the show is going to go, though.
I don't know. That's a good question.
And that's the problem that I always have with anything like this. Now, when we flashed over and we talk about the Cobra Kai series, those guys basically have an ending in mind. They had the whole storyline. And basically what they were trying to do is they have a rough idea about how many seasons they want to do. Now, if they don't get a green light or somebody says, you know what, maybe we're going to end it after the next season, they said that they were prepared to just start condensing everything so they could still finish the story. But more often than not, what ends up happening is people might have an idea of where they might want the story to end, but then the show gets canceled or whatever, and it's like, it's always fascinating to me to figure out how many seasons you want to go in order to tell a story, because you don't really want to go too long to where you got a bunch of filler episodes or you're pretty much wearing out your welcome in the sense of people are just tired of seeing it. But you also don't want to do it too short and run into the same problems that you run into with films where you just have to kind of blow through everything. You can't really spend any time with the meat of the story. So I'm curious on...
Yeah.
I mean, because look at this. We only have 4 more episodes. And it really makes me wonder where they're going to leave off at the end of the season. Do you think they're going to... Do you think they're going to... Do you think they're going to actually tie up the Crosshair storyline this season?
I don't think they're going to tie it up. So getting to... And it's funny because you brought him up. So getting to the end of this...
Oh, yeah, right. Sorry. Hey, man, you know what? This whole thing is just about 2 guys hanging out on a Friday night, or Monday night in this case, talking Star Wars, and you guys are basically joining this. We try not to make this too formal of a show, even though we have all these graphics and order. And but you know what? It's just a big hang.
Yeah, definitely. But the final conclusion of this, and this was kind of really cool, is that our little Admiral friend, he kind of realizes, oh, I kind of underestimated your friends there. All right, they are becoming more of a problem than I realized. And so then, of course, Crosshair, asks like permission to hunt them down, and then he's just like, granted. And the look on Crosshair's face, that music that played right under it was like really chilling, and I was just like, all right, this is really going to get interesting. So now we kind of know where this end of the season is going to go, as far as, all right, well, now they're going to have to deal with Crosshair, and Crosshair is really going to be after them now. And so this really going to be interesting because yes, they're going to probably have that run in with him. How that's going to happen, I don't know if it's going to be a situation where Crosshair actually acquires Omega, and that's how the season ends on that kind of cliffhanger, or if it's a situation where they might kill Crosshair, or maybe someone from the other team dies, or I don't know, or maybe they just kind of like have some big climatic battle and they barely escape, and we got to catch up with it next season. Who knows? But
I'm wondering if
it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting in the sense of there's a lot of directions they could go, because another possible direction, which I kind of want to see, but I also kind of don't, is more of Crosshair either getting the whole inhibitor chip out of his head and then he rejoins the team. And that could happen. That could actually happen maybe. I don't think it's going to happen this season, but it could happen maybe in some subsequent seasons. Might be interesting. We'll have to see. Let me get to some of these chats. Dwight's got a few of them. He says, exactly, this is kind of showing worlds noticing that this is not the Republic they are used to. And that's exactly it. That's one of the brilliant things about this show, is that they're showing us, hey, through the citizens' eyes, because again, we see everything kind of at a macro level, but when you're looking at the citizens, they're starting to go, oh, this is kind of new. The Republic wouldn't necessarily do this. And it's taking on those sinister overtones that I think are really cool. And they're doing it in such a way that it's how I think it would really happen. And of course,
especially. Well, one of the things I forgot to mention is when he gave his whole little speech to Ryloth, and he was basically saying like, the assassination attempt, on Taft's life, and it's like, we believe he's going to pull through, and I'm like, pull through? The man is dead, like, like his brains are like splattered all over the pavement, basically. But once again, it's just kind of like giving them a little bit of hope, but knowing there really isn't any, and I just think that's adds to that whole sinister vibe.
Yeah. Well, then he goes on to say, I think Crosshair remains in play until they are done using clones totally. And then Ronaldo says, I still think Crosshair will die this season, that's a really interesting prediction. Because I go back and forth on that. I could see definitely a scenario where Crosshair does die this season, because in a sense, you could see where he would, I guess, serve his purpose. But then on the other hand, there's something that's kind of cool, and it would be tempting to have one of the Bad Batch guys on the other side, because they're kind of like the foil, right? So you had the Bad Batch, and they're doing their thing, but then you have Crosshair, and being that he was one of them, he knows all their tricks, and he can employ some techniques, strategies, what have you, to counteract whatever it is they're doing. And there's something that's interesting in that you essentially have one of the clones who's still part of the Republic, because as we pointed out, the Empire was the Republic. They're essentially the legitimate government. Now they're changing their tactics a little bit, and they're becoming more of a fascist regime, but it wasn't like anybody overthrew them. I mean, it just basically, they morphed into this new thing. So Crosshair technically is on what you would call the right side. But as we know, the government changed and went from something that was more noble to something that was a little bit more sinister and a little bit more malevolent. So now, of course, Ronaldo says the big thing that I think is on all of our minds. He says he may be redeemed, but this is Star Wars. So he cannot be redeemed without dying. Which, that is one of the things, and I've brought this up on some other shows, and I think I said this when we were doing the Rise of Skywalker review, that it was such a missed opportunity with Kylo, in my opinion. Because with Vader, you had the whole thing where at the end, he kind of he's redeemed, he turns good, he basically says, I'm sorry, and then he dies. And that was kind of cool to see that redemption, because Vader was somebody that especially if you grew up watching this trilogy in real time like I did, there's like no way in the world you would have thought this guy would ever turn anywhere remotely good. But see, what I thought would have been a really cool opportunity with Kylo, and this is something I'd always wondered, is what if you had a monster like a Darth Vader or somebody like that, and they lived? And now they have to face the galaxy. They have to face. It's like they're good now, but everybody hates them, and they have to almost atone for what they've done and earn trust. And I mean, there's just so much storytelling that they could do there. And so with Vader, I get why they did what they did with that. But with Kylo, especially since you were going to just go ahead and go the redemption route anyway, what they could have done, which I think fans would have warmed up to, is they could have just been like, look, okay, let's let Kylo live and have to face now all of what he did and how he's returning to Ben Solo, and everybody hates him and doesn't trust him and all this other stuff, and he's got to, that just would have been really cool, I think.
Absolutely.
And then
it definitely would have been cool.
Dwight says, right, only stormtroopers remain dead in Star Wars. Well, that's because you don't have any stormtrooper force ghosts.
All right.
Which would be a really interesting concept, actually. Can you imagine, like, the stormtrooper? I mean, the closest we would ever get to seeing something like that would be the holographic transmissions, because they kind of look force ghostish in a sense, just a little bit more transparent, but I digress. But hey, guys, you know what? If you enjoyed this show, or even if you enjoyed just watching us talk about this whole thing, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, because it really does help us out, and it helps us to be able to bring more of this stuff to you so we can continue hanging out with you guys. At some point, I actually miss this opportunity. This is so funny. Saturday, I was going to do, because we got this Facebook group, the head-to-head of Star Wars community. Can't believe I actually said it right this time. And just kind of on a whim, because they got that Star Wars Visions thing that's coming out. They had a trailer. So what I thought I would do, because I wanted to test a couple things, I was going to actually just do an impromptu live stream Saturday and talk about Visions and, is this a cool thing? Do we really need it? Kind of like what I did with the droids thing. But I totally forgot about it. Scheduled the event, and I just, it was like 4 o'clock on Saturday, and it was one of those things where I felt like there was something I was supposed to do. So if anybody that's watching this, either live or maybe after the fact, that maybe belonged to that group and was like, yeah, what happened? Well, that's what happened. So I'm gonna try to do that maybe this Saturday. We'll see. Just, like a 10 or 15 minute video. It's not going to be anything super big. I think I'm going to show the trailer in there or whatever. And just do a little experiment. So, again, if you guys actually want to do this, see, like Ronaldo's already commenting in that Star Wars Visions looks amazing. So we see where in the fence he falls. But, yeah, join our Facebook group if you're on Facebook, and, you can check that out. So this Friday, we're going to review head-to-head. I wish. The High Republic issue number 6. I haven't read yet, but I will before the review. So that should be really interesting, because I think, I'm going to double check this before we go on Friday, but I think that that's the last issue in the High Republic comic series, at least this particular series. They're going to go on with other High Republic comics, obviously. And in fact, I think they already have another one. But I think that this little adventure that they had was a 6-issue series. So this will be the last of those reviews. And then, of course, we'll be back next Monday reviewing the 13th episode of The Bad Batch. So you guys are not going to want to miss that. So again, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We want to be able to bring this stuff to you guys. We want to be able to chat with you guys and talk to you and all that. What did you end up thinking of this episode of The Bad Batch? We know what our people chatting thought. Leave a comment in the comment section below. All right, so I think with that, we're going to wrap this episode up, and we'll see you guys Friday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time as usual. And with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.